I paid £385,000 to a man I'd never met. He had photos of me, private ones, intimate ones. He knew things about my life I'd never told anyone. And the woman I loved? She was the one who gave him everything. I thought I was building a future. I was funding my own destruction. I saw her from across the rooftop bar in Makati. The city lights stretched out behind her like a blanket of stars, and she was laughing with the bartender, her hands moving as she told some story I couldn't hear. I was nursing my second gin and tonic, trying to convince myself this business trip wasn't just another excuse to avoid my empty flat in London. Then she turned and looked directly at me. I should have looked away. I didn't. She walked over, just like that. No hesitation. "You look like you're thinking too much," she said. Her accent was soft, musical. "Is that a British thing?" I laughed. I actually laughed. When was the last time I'd done that? "Guilty," I said. "Quentin Strickland. And yes, we're champions at overthinking everything." She smiled and extended her hand. "Tatiana, and I think you need another drink." I did need another drink. I needed a lot of things I didn't know how to ask for anymore. We talked for 3 hours that night. She asked me about London, about my work, about what brought me to Manila. I told her I was consulting for a tech firm, helping them restructure their operations. I didn't tell her I'd taken the contract because my divorce lawyer had bled me dry and my kids hadn't called me in 8 months. I didn't tell her I was 70 years old and felt like I'd already lived past my expiration date. She listened like every word mattered. "You have kind eyes," she said, touching my hand across the table. Tired, but kind. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her. By the end of the night, I had her number. By the end of the week, I'd extended my stay in Manila. She told me she worked as a hostess at a club in the city, entertaining businessmen, making conversation, keeping them company. "It's not what you think," she said quickly when she saw my face. "I just talk to them, make them feel welcome. That's all." I nodded. I didn't judge. Who was I to judge anyone? "I want to get out of that life," she whispered. "I'm tired of smiling for money. I want something real." When she looked at me, I felt something I hadn't felt in 5 years. I felt needed. Within 2 weeks, I was flying back to Manila every other weekend. My consulting contract had ended, but I made up reasons to return. A follow-up meeting, a potential new client. Tatiana met me at the airport every time, and every time she hugged me like I'd been gone for years. "I missed you," she'd say into my shoulder. I'd hold her and think, this is what I've been missing. This is what my life needed. By the 3rd month, I'd made a decision. I rented a serviced apartment in Makati, 2 bedrooms, a balcony overlooking the city. I told myself it was an investment, a place to stay when I visited. But really, I knew. I was moving to the Philippines. For her, the first time she stayed over, she cried. We were sitting on the balcony, the city humming below us, and she just started crying. "What's wrong?" I asked, panicked. She shook her head. "Nothing's wrong. Everything's right. You make me feel safe, Quentin. I've never felt safe before." I pulled her close. I kissed her hair. I whispered, "You'll always be safe with me." I meant it. I would have died to protect her. That's how deeply I'd already fallen. I rented us a 2-bedroom condo in Salcedo Village. Tatiana moved in 3 days later. She didn't have much to bring. A suitcase of clothes, a box of photographs, a stuffed bear she'd had since childhood. "This is all I own," she said, looking embarrassed. I took her hand. "This is our home now. We'll fill it together." And we did. I bought furniture, kitchen supplies, a television. I paid for everything. Groceries, utilities, her phone bill, her clothing. She'd quit the club, she told me. She wanted to focus on us, on building something real. I was so proud of her, so grateful. But sometimes she'd disappear, just for a few hours, but without explanation. I'd wake up and she'd be gone. No note, no message. Then she'd return in the afternoon, smiling, carrying shopping bags, just seeing my family, she'd say. My mom needed help with something. I didn't push. I didn't want to seem controlling or jealous. I wanted to be different from the men she'd dealt with before. I wanted to be the kind of man she could trust. So I smiled and said, "Of course, family's important." But at night, I'd lie awake wondering why she never invited me to meet them. We fell into a routine. Morning coffee on the balcony. I'd read the news on my tablet while she scrolled through her phone. We'd have lunch at small Filipino restaurants she'd pick, places with handwritten menus and plastic chairs. I loved those meals. She'd teach me Tagalog words, laughing when I mispronounced them. "You sound like a robot," she'd tease. I didn't care. I just wanted to hear her laugh. At night, we'd watch television. She'd curl up against me, her head on my chest, and I'd think, "This is it. This is what happiness feels like." I'd forgotten. Then one afternoon she came to me crying. "My mom's sick," she said. "She needs medicine. I don't know what to do." I didn't hesitate. "How much?" I asked. She shook her head. "I can't ask you for money, Quentin. It's not right." But I insisted. I transferred 20,000 pesos to her account that same day. She hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. "You're the best man I've ever known," she whispered. I held on to those words. I replayed them every time doubt crept into my mind. 2 weeks later, it was her younger brother. School fees. He wanted to go to university, but the family couldn't afford it. Again, I didn't hesitate. 50,000 pesos. She cried when I told her. Real tears. "I don't deserve you," she said. I kissed her forehead. "You deserve everything." I meant it. But something in the back of my mind was starting to whisper. Something I didn't want to hear. Why had I never met her mother? Why didn't she ever video call her family when I was around? I pushed the thoughts away. I was being paranoid. This was real. It had to be real. She'd be affectionate some days, touching my arm when we walked, kissing me goodnight, telling me she loved me. Other days, she was distant, cold, almost. She'd snap at me over small things. "Why do you always ask so many questions?" she'd say. Or, "Can you just give me space?" I'd apologize. I'd buy her flowers or take her to a nice restaurant, and things would go back to normal. I told myself it was cultural. I told myself I was learning to navigate a relationship with someone younger, someone from a different world. I was so desperate to make it work that I'd make excuses for anything. It was a Tuesday evening. We were watching a movie, some action film she'd picked. Her phone was on the coffee table between us. It buzzed. Once, twice. I glanced at it without thinking. The screen lit up with a message notification. The name at the top said Jay. The message said, "Miss you, baby. When you coming home?" My stomach dropped. I stared at the screen until it went dark again. Then I looked at Tatiana. She hadn't noticed, or she was pretending not to notice. My throat felt tight. "Who's Jay?" I asked. My voice came out quieter than I intended. She glanced at me, then at her phone. "What?" "Your phone. Someone named Jay just messaged you." I tried to sound casual. I failed. She picked up her phone, looked at the screen, then shrugged. "Just a friend from my old work. He doesn't know I quit." She said it so easily, so dismissively, like it was nothing. I wanted to believe her. God, I needed to believe her. "Okay," I said, but it wasn't okay. That night, I couldn't sleep. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing things. Small things. She'd take phone calls in the bathroom. She'd angle her phone away from me when she was typing. Once I saw her delete an entire message thread right in front of me. She caught me watching and her face hardened. "Why are you always watching me?" she snapped. "You don't trust me?" The words hit me like a punch. "Of course I trust you," I said quickly. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make you feel that way." She stared at me for a long moment, then her face softened. "I'm sorry too," she said. "I just hate feeling like I'm being monitored. My ex used to do that. I felt terrible. I apologized again. I bought her a bracelet the next day, a silver one with a small diamond. She smiled when she opened the box. It It's beautiful, she said, and kissed me. Everything felt normal again. But at night, when she slept beside me, I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling. Who was Jay? Why did he call her baby? Why was I so afraid to ask? One evening, she left her phone on the kitchen counter while she showered. I stood there staring at it for 5 minutes. I knew I shouldn't look. I knew it was wrong. But my hands moved before my brain could stop them. I picked it up. It was locked. Of course it was locked. I put it back down. My heart was racing. I felt sick. What was I doing? I trusted her. I loved her. I went to the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed, my head in my hands. When she came out of the shower, she looked at me and frowned. "You okay?" I nodded. "Just tired." She came over and kissed my forehead. "Get some rest, love." But I couldn't rest. I couldn't stop thinking about that message. "Miss you, baby. When you coming home?" Who says that to just a friend? I started watching her more closely. I hated myself for it, but I couldn't stop. I noticed she'd smile at her phone sometimes. Typing quickly, her face lit up in a way it never was when she looked at me. I noticed she'd go out for hours and come back with nothing. No shopping bags. No explanation. Just a quick, "I was with my cousin." I'd nod and say nothing. I was afraid if I pushed too hard she'd leave, and I couldn't handle that. Not again. Not after everything I'd already lost. One night, she got a call at midnight. She grabbed her phone and rushed to the bathroom. I heard her voice through the door, low and urgent. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was different. Softer. Intimate. When she came back, I asked, "Everything okay?" She nodded. "Just my mom. She's worried about money again. I offered to send more." She shook her head. "Not tonight. Let's just sleep." But she didn't sleep. I could feel her lying awake beside me, her body tense. I wanted to ask what was wrong. I wanted to demand the truth. But I said nothing. I just lay there, trapped in my own fear. It happened 8 months in, a Tuesday night, almost 10 p.m. Tatiana was in the shower. I was on the couch, half watching the news, when someone knocked on the door. Sharp, aggressive. I frowned. We weren't expecting anyone. I walked over and opened it without thinking. A man stood there. 30s, maybe. Fit, tattooed arms. Cold eyes that looked right through me. "We need to talk, old man," he said. Before I could respond, he pushed past me into the apartment. "Hey, you can't just..." But he was already inside, looking around like he owned the place. My heart started pounding. "Who are you? What do you want?" He pulled out his phone. Didn't say a word. Just turned the screen toward me. I looked. My blood turned to ice. Photos. Photos of Tatiana and me. At a restaurant. Walking through a mall. Sitting on our balcony. And others. Intimate ones. Photos of us in bed. Through the window. Someone had been watching us. Someone had been taking pictures. I couldn't breathe. "What is this?" My voice came out as a whisper. He swiped to the next screen. Messages. Between him and Tatiana. I saw her name at the top. I read the words. My hands started shaking. The British guy's loaded. One message said, "Just keep him happy. We'll drain him slow." Another one, from him. "How much you get this week?" Her reply. 15,000. He gave it for my brother's school. Idiot, didn't even ask for proof. I looked up at him. My mouth was dry. I couldn't form words. He smiled. Not a friendly smile. A shark's smile. "Sit down, old man," he said, gesturing to my own couch. I sat. My legs wouldn't hold me anymore. He sat across from me, leaning back like he was visiting an old friend. "I'm Jay," he said, "Tatiana's boyfriend. And you, Quentin, are in a very bad situation." I heard the shower turn off in the bathroom. Jay heard it too. He didn't move, just kept staring at me. "Here's how this works," he said calmly. "I have these photos. I have the messages. I have a lot more than what I just showed you. And unless you want your kids seeing their father in bed with a girl young enough to be his granddaughter, unless you want your business contacts seeing this, unless you want this all over the internet, you're going to pay me. How much? My voice didn't sound like mine. £385,000, he said. You've got 3 days to think about it. I don't have that kind of money, I said. It was a lie. I did. He knew it. He smiled. Yeah, you do. I've seen your bank statements. My heart stopped. How? Tatiana's very helpful, he said. She gave me everything I needed. The bathroom door opened. Tatiana stepped out wrapped in a towel, her hair dripping. She saw Jay. Her face didn't change. Not surprise. Not fear. Nothing. She just looked at me. Quentin, what's going on? Her voice was so calm, so controlled. I stared at her. This woman I'd loved. This woman I'd given everything to. And I knew she'd known he was coming. Maybe she'd even let him in. Not physically, but mentally, emotionally. She'd opened every door. Tell him, Tat, Jay said, standing up. Tell him you love him. Tell him it's all a misunderstanding. But she didn't say anything. She just stood there, water dripping onto the floor. Jay walked to the door. 3 days, Quentin. I'll be in touch. Then he was gone. The silence was deafening. Tatiana moved first. She walked over and sat next to me on the couch. She put her hand on my knee. I flinched. I don't know what he's talking about, she said softly. I swear, Quentin, I don't know why he's doing this. I looked at her hand on my knee. Her fingers were shaking. Or maybe that was my leg. He had messages from you, I said. I saw them. He's lying, she said. He probably faked them. He's obsessed with me. From the club, I told you about the creepy guys. But her eyes were dry. Her voice was too steady. And I realized I was looking at a stranger. I didn't sleep that night. Tatiana did. She curled up on her side of the bed and fell asleep within minutes, like nothing had happened. I lay there staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. £385,000. He'd said 3 days. What happened after 3 days? Would he really send those photos to my children, to my colleagues? I imagined my daughter opening an email, seeing her father. I felt sick. I got up and went to the balcony. The city stretched out below me, lights twinkling in the darkness, beautiful and indifferent. I thought about calling the police, but what would I say? A man broke into my apartment and blackmailed me with photos of me and my girlfriend. Would they even care? Would they help? Or would they see me as just another stupid foreigner who got played? The next morning, Tatiana acted normal. She made coffee. She asked if I wanted breakfast. I couldn't eat. Are you okay? She asked, touching my arm. I pulled away. Don't, I said. She frowned. Don't what? Don't touch me. Don't pretend. Her face hardened. I told you, I don't know what he wants. I'm a victim here too, Quentin. He's using me to get to you. Then call the police, I said. Let's go together. Right now. We'll report him. She hesitated. Just for a second, but I saw it. I can't, she said. Why not? Because he'll hurt me. He's dangerous. Then we'll get protection. There are shelters, programs. She shook her head. You don't understand how it works here. The police don't help girls like me. I wanted to believe her. Part of me still wanted to believe her, but that part was getting smaller. 2 days passed. I didn't hear from Jay. I started to hope maybe it was over. Maybe he'd been bluffing. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. Hello? Quentin. It was Jay. Have you thought about my offer? It's not an offer, I said. It's extortion. He laughed. Call it whatever you want. Do you have the money or not? I closed my eyes. I need more time. You've had 3 days. I need to move funds, liquidate some assets. It takes time. You've got 2 more days. He said, After that, I start sending emails. Your daughter first. What's her name? Rebecca? My breath caught. How do you know my daughter's name? I know everything about you, Quentin. 2 days. He hung up. I looked at Tatiana. She was on the couch, scrolling through her phone. That was him, I said. She looked up. What did he say? He knows my daughter's name. Her face went pale. Quentin, I never told him that. I swear. Then how does he know? She shook her head. I don't know. Maybe he looked you up online. LinkedIn, Facebook. I hadn't considered that. Maybe she was telling the truth. Maybe she was innocent. But then why wasn't she more upset? Why wasn't she scared? I'm going to pay him, I said. She stared at me. What? I don't have a choice. You can't give in to him. That's what he wants. If I don't, he destroys my life. If you do, he'll just ask for more. She was right. I knew she was right. But what choice did I have? That night, Jay sent me the bank details. An account in Manila. Untraceable, probably. I sat at my laptop for an hour, staring at the screen. 100,000 pounds. That was the first payment he demanded, with more to follow. My hands hovered over the keyboard. I thought about my daughter, my son, my grandchildren I'd never met, because my kids hated me. If those photos got out, I'd lose even the possibility of reconciliation. I transferred the money. Then I sat back and waited. My phone buzzed. A message from Jay. Good boy. I'll be in touch. I felt hollow, like I'd just signed my own death warrant. 2 weeks later, Jay came back. He didn't knock this time. He had a key. I was sitting on the couch when the door opened, and he walked in like he lived there. Tatiana was out. Or so she'd said. Where did you get a key? I demanded. He held it up. Your girlfriend gave it to me. Thoughtful, isn't she? I felt the room spin. She wouldn't do that. Ask her, he said, tossing the key on the counter. Now, we need to talk about the next payment. You said one payment, I said. That was it. He laughed, sat down across from me. That was the first payment. There's interest now, and insurance. Another 50,000 pounds. I don't have it. Yes, you do. I've seen your accounts. I stood up. My hands were shaking. I'm not giving you another penny. He pulled out his phone, started scrolling. Okay, let's see. Rebecca Strickland. Works at a law firm in Bristol. Here's her email. Should I send it now, or would you like to watch? I sat down, defeated. Why are you doing this? Because I can, he said. Because old guys like you come here thinking you can buy a young girl's love, thinking you're special. You're not. You're a walking ATM. And I'm making a withdrawal. Does Tatiana know? I asked. Does she know you're doing this? He smiled. What do you think? I didn't want to think. I didn't want to know. But deep down, I already did. I'll get you the money, I said. You have 2 days. He stood up, walked to the door, stopped. Oh, and Quentin? Don't even think about running. I know where your kids live. I know where your grandkids go to school. You run, they suffer, understand? I nodded. I couldn't speak. He left. When Tatiana came home, I confronted her. Did you give Jay a key to this apartment? She froze. What? No. Why would I do that? He has one. He walked in today. She shook her head. He must have made a copy somehow, maybe when I wasn't looking. How would he get your key without you noticing? I don't know, Quentin. Stop interrogating me. She grabbed her purse and headed for the door. Where are you going? I asked. Out! I can't deal with this right now. She slammed the door behind her. I sat there alone in the silence. I'd just accused her and she'd walked out. Any innocent person would have stayed, would have fought to clear their name. But she'd left, and I knew what that meant. Over the next 4 months, the demands kept coming. 50,000 pounds, then 30, then 75. Each time, Jay had a reason. Administration fees, security deposits, Penalty for late payment. I paid every time. I liquidated my retirement accounts. I took out loans against my property in London. I sold shares. I drained everything. And each time, Tatiana would say the same thing. I don't understand why he's doing this to you. But she never left. She stayed in the apartment I paid for, slept in the bed I bought, ate the food I provided. And every time I looked at her, I wondered, was she scared of him? Or was she counting her share? One evening, I asked her directly, "Are you working with him?" She looked at me with wide eyes. "How can you ask me that?" "Because you're still here. Because you haven't gone to the police. Because every time he contacts me, you're conveniently not around. I stay because I love you," she said. But there were no tears. No emotion. Just words. Empty words. "Do you?" I asked. "Do you really love me?" She walked over and kissed me. "Of course I do." But her lips were cold, and I felt nothing. By the 6th month, I'd paid £385,000. My savings were gone. My retirement was gone. I'd taken out loans I'd never be able to repay. I was 70 years old and financially ruined. And the worst part? I'd done it to myself. I'd seen the red flags. I'd ignored them. I'd chosen to believe a beautiful lie over an ugly truth. And now I was trapped. It was 3 a.m. when her phone buzzed. She was asleep next to me, her breathing soft and steady. The phone lit up on the nightstand. I don't know what made me look. Maybe desperation. Maybe I just needed to know for sure. I reached over carefully and picked it up. The screen was unlocked. She'd forgotten to lock it. Or maybe she'd gotten careless. I opened her messages. Found the thread with Jay. My hand started shaking as I scrolled up. "He paid again, lol," she'd written. "5 days ago. Easy money," she'd added. Jay had replied, "Told you. Old guys are the best targets. Lonely and stupid." She'd sent back a laughing emoji. I kept scrolling, further back. Weeks. Months. When should we hit him for the next payment? Maybe wait 2 weeks so he doesn't get suspicious. How much do you think we can get total? At least $400K. Maybe more if we play it right. I read everything, every message, every plan, every laugh at my expense. They'd planned the rooftop bar meeting. She'd been told to look for an older Western man alone, to approach him, to make him feel special. The move-in had been calculated. The family emergencies had been scripted. Even the timing of Jay's first visit had been coordinated. "Make sure you're in the shower when I come. He needs to think you don't know." I was a script, a con, a mark. Nothing more. I put the phone back down. I didn't wake her. I didn't scream. I just sat there in the dark, staring at her sleeping face. This woman I'd loved. This woman I'd given everything to. She'd never loved me. She'd probably never even liked me. I was a wallet, a pension plan, a retirement fund with a heartbeat. I thought about waking her up, confronting her, demanding an explanation. But what would be the point? She'd lie. She'd cry. She'd say Jay forced her, and part of me might even believe her because I was that desperate, that pathetic. So I just sat there until the sun came up. When she woke, she smiled at me. "Good morning," she said, stretching. "Did you sleep okay?" I nodded. "Fine." She got up and went to the bathroom. I heard the shower start, and I made a decision. I couldn't keep living like this. I couldn't keep bleeding money to them. I couldn't keep pretending I didn't know the truth. I had to leave. I had to get out before they took everything, before they destroyed what little was left of me. 3 days later, Jay called again. "One more payment," he said. "Then it's over. I promise." "How much?" My voice was flat. "Dead. £75,000. I don't have it. Then get it. I don't have anything left." I said, "You've taken everything." He laughed. "You've got property in London. Sell it. Or I start sending photos tomorrow." "Send them," I said. The words came out before I could stop them. There was silence on the other end. "What did you say?" I said, "Send them. I don't care anymore. You're bluffing. Try me." I hung up. My hands were shaking, but I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Power. I'd called his bluff. Maybe he'd send the photos. Maybe he wouldn't. But I was done being controlled by fear. That night, I told Tatiana I was leaving the Philippines. We were eating dinner at the small table by the window. She was scrolling through her phone, barely paying attention to me. "I'm going back to London," I said. She looked up. "When?" "Tomorrow." I expected her to argue, to beg me to stay, to say she couldn't live without me. She just nodded. "Okay." That was it. Just okay. "You're not going to ask why?" I said. She shrugged. "You've been unhappy. Maybe it's better." "Better for who?" "For both of us." She went back to her phone. I stared at her. This woman who'd cried and told me I made her feel safe. This woman who'd said I was the best man she'd ever known. Now she couldn't even pretend to care that I was leaving. "Did you ever love me?" I asked. She sighed, put down her phone. "Quentin, don't do this. I just want to know. Was any of it real?" She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "I cared about you. In my own way. That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're going to get." She stood up, walked to the bedroom. I sat there alone at the table, staring at my half-eaten meal. I realized then that I'd never mattered to her. I'd been a job, a con, a way to make money. And now that the money was gone, so was her interest in pretending. That night, I packed my things. One suitcase. That's all I needed. I'd arrived in the Philippines with hope and dreams of a second chance. I was leaving with shame and an empty bank account. Tatiana watched me pack from the doorway. "You don't have to go," she said. But there was no emotion in her voice. "Yes, I do," I said. She nodded. "Okay. Well, good luck." "Good luck." That's what she said. After everything. After 8 months together. After all the money I'd given her. After destroying my life. "Good luck." "Goodbye, Tatiana," I said. She didn't say anything. Just walked away. I booked a flight for 6 a.m. I left the condo keys on the kitchen counter. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't leave a note. I just walked out while Tatiana was asleep, or pretending to be asleep. I couldn't tell anymore. At the airport, I kept looking over my shoulder. I was terrified Jay would appear, that he'd stop me somehow, that he'd make one final demand. But he didn't come. I checked in. I went through security. I boarded the plane. And I left the Philippines behind. During the flight, I couldn't stop thinking. Had Jay already sent the photos? Would I land in London to find my life destroyed? My phone was off. I was afraid to turn it on. Afraid to see the messages, the emails, the calls from my kids demanding to know what I'd done. I sat in my seat, staring out the window at the clouds, and felt completely numb. 12 hours later, we landed at Heathrow. I turned on my phone. My heart was pounding. Messages loaded, but they weren't from my kids. They were from my bank. Overdraft notices, loan payment reminders, credit card bills. I'd destroyed myself financially, but the photos hadn't been sent, at least not yet. I took a taxi back to my flat in London. It looked exactly as I'd left it, dusty, empty, cold. I dropped my suitcase by the door and sat down on the couch. The same couch I'd sat on 5 years ago after my divorce. The same couch where I'd decided I needed to find happiness again. And look where that had gotten me. I changed my phone number the next day. I deleted my social media accounts. I cut myself off from everyone. My kids tried to call the old number. When they couldn't reach me, they stopped trying. I was relieved. I couldn't face them. Couldn't bear the thought of them asking questions I couldn't answer. The shame was unbearable. I'd been blackmailed, extorted, played for a fool, and I'd let it happen. I'd ignored every warning sign because I was lonely. Because I wanted to believe someone could love me, I'd paid £385,000 for a lie. I'd ruined myself financially for a woman who'd never cared about me. And the worst part? I couldn't even be angry at her. I was angry at myself for being so stupid, so desperate, so blind. Weeks passed, then months. I barely left the flat. I had groceries delivered. I paid my bills online. I avoided mirrors because I couldn't stand to see my own face. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, my heart racing, convinced Jay was outside my door, that he'd followed me to London, that the nightmare wasn't over, but he never came. The photos were never sent. Maybe he'd gotten enough money. Maybe he'd moved on to the next target. I didn't know. I'd never know. And that uncertainty was its own kind of torture. It's been a year now. I'm still in the same flat, still alone. I haven't dated, haven't even thought about it. The idea of trusting someone again makes me feel sick. I barely leave the house except for doctor appointments and the occasional walk to the corner shop. My neighbors probably think I'm a recluse. They're right. I am. I've become the kind of old man I used to pity. Isolated, suspicious, afraid of the world. Sometimes I wonder if Jay ever sent those photos. I check my email obsessively, search my name online. Nothing ever comes up. I don't think he sent them. He didn't need to. He'd already won. He got the money without having to expose me. Smart, cruel, effective. I think about Tatiana sometimes. Late at night when I can't sleep, I wonder if she's still in Manila. If she's found another lonely old man to target. Probably. I was just one in a long line. Another wallet. Another mark. I wasn't special. I was convenient. I don't hate her. That's the strange part. I should, but I don't. I hate myself for being so desperate for love that I ignored reality. For being so lonely that I paid for companionship and called it a relationship. For seeing the red flags and choosing to look away because the truth was too painful. I did this to myself. Tatiana and Jay just took advantage of what I was already willing to give. My kids reached out last month. My daughter Rebecca, she sent me a letter. Actual paper mail. She's getting married. She invited me to the wedding. I stared at that invitation for 3 days. She still wanted me in her life. After everything. After years of silence. She was giving me a second chance. But I can't go. I can't face her. Can't stand at her wedding pretending to be a proud father when I'm really just a broken old man who threw away his future for a fantasy. I sent her a card with money, a wedding gift, and an excuse. Work obligations, health issues, lies, always lies. She probably saw right through them. Maybe she expected it. I wouldn't blame her. I'm 71 now. I should have years left, but I feel ancient, used up. Every morning I wake up and think about Tatiana's smile, Jay's cold eyes, the messages on her phone, lonely and stupid. They were right. I was. I gave them £385,000. But I lost more than money. I lost my ability to trust, my sense of safety, my dignity, my self-respect, my future, everything that made life worth living, and I can't get any of it back. The flat is quiet. It's always quiet now. Sometimes I turn on the television just to hear voices. Other times I sit in silence and remember what it felt like to believe someone cared about me. Even if it was fake, it felt real for a while. And maybe that's the saddest part. I'd rather have the beautiful lie than the ugly truth. Even now, even knowing everything, I still miss her. I miss the version of her I invented in my head. The one who loved me, who needed me, who saw me as more than a bank account. But that woman never existed. She was a character in a con, and I was too desperate to see it. I'm still here, though, still breathing, still waking up every morning even though I don't particularly want to. That counts for something, I suppose. Survival. It's not much. It's not redemption. It's not healing. But it's all I have left. I'll never get that money back. I'll never get those months back. I'll never be the man I was before I met her. But I'm still here, broken, ashamed, alone, but alive. And maybe somehow that has to be enough.